The unexpected encounter. The night was quiet, the streets were empty, and only the soft sound of the wind moved through the trees. A man named Daniel was walking home after a long day. He enjoyed the silence, but that night something felt different. There was a strange feeling in the air, a sense that something unusual was about to happen. As he walked past a small park, he stopped. He thought he heard something faint. At first he believed it was the wind again, but then it came clearer. It was the sound of crying, soft and weak, like the voice of a child. Daniel froze. His heart started to beat faster. Crying at this hour? Who could it be? He turned his head and listened carefully. The sound came again, this time from the dark corner near the park bench. Daniel slowly stepped closer. His footsteps were careful. His mind was full of questions. What if it was a trick? What if someone was hiding there? But deep inside he also felt worried. If it was really a child, then she needed help. When Daniel reached the bench, he saw a small figure curled up. It was a little girl, no more than 6 years old. She had messy hair and her tiny shoulders were shaking from sobs. She wore a simple dress, dirty and torn. Her small shoes looked old and broken. She looked lost and helpless. Daniel knelt down slowly so he would not scare her. His voice was soft and gentle. "Hey, are you okay?" The little girl looked up. Her eyes were full of tears. She didn't say a word. She only stared at him as if she did not trust anyone anymore. Daniel felt his heart break. He could see fear in her eyes, and yet he also saw something else. Loneliness. He gently said, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you, you're safe now." He offered his hand slowly. The girl looked at it for a long moment. Then, with shaking fingers, she placed her small hand in his. That simple touch was powerful. Daniel felt the weight of her fear, her pain, and her hope. He lifted her gently and asked, "Where is your mother?" "Your father?" But the girl only shook her head. She whispered a word so soft that Daniel almost missed it. "Gone?" The single word sent a chill through him. What did she mean? Were her parents gone forever? Or had they left her behind? He did not want to push her too much. He just nodded and said, "It's okay, I'll take care of you for now." Daniel looked around the park. The streets were empty. No one came searching. No voice called out for a missing child. The silence felt heavy. How could a little girl be here alone in the dark? Something about the situation felt wrong, almost unnatural. As Daniel walked with the girl in his arms, he noticed she kept glancing over her shoulder. Her little hands clutched his shirt tightly as if she was afraid something, or someone, might come back. That small action filled him with unease. What had this child gone through? He carried her to a nearby cafe that was still open. He sat her down and gave her a cup of warm milk. At first she only stared at it, but after a moment she began to sip slowly. The warmth seemed to calm her. Daniel watched closely, wondering how much pain she had endured. The girl finally spoke a few words. "Thank you." Her voice was weak but sincere. Daniel smiled gently and said, "You're welcome, sweetheart, you're safe now." She nodded, but her eyes still looked haunted. Inside Daniel's mind, questions raced. Who was this little girl? Where did she come from? Why was she alone? And most of all, why did he feel such a strong pull to protect her? It was almost as if fate had placed her in his path. The night grew colder outside, the streets darker. Daniel decided he could not leave her alone. He made a choice. He would keep her safe until he found her family, or until the truth revealed itself. As they left the cafe, the girl held his hand tightly. She stayed close. Her trust was growing, but the fear had not completely gone. Daniel felt that their journey together had only just begun. He did not know that this one act of kindness, this one unexpected encounter, would soon change his life forever. For now, all he knew was this. He had found a little girl in the dark, but what he truly discovered was the beginning of a story much larger than himself. The rescue. Daniel walked with the little girl by his side. The night was dark and cold, but the child's tiny hand in his gave him strength. He could still hear her soft sobs, every sound cutting into his heart. He knew he had to do something. He could not just take her home and pretend nothing happened. He had to make sure she was safe. They reached his small apartment. Daniel unlocked the door and gently guided her inside. The girl's eyes looked around the room with caution. She did not trust places anymore. It was clear. She stood silently, her hands twisting nervously as if she was ready to run if she felt danger. Daniel spoke softly. "This is my home. You can rest here tonight. No one will hurt you, I promise." His words were simple, but his tone was warm. Slowly, the child sat on the edge of the couch. Her eyes followed his every move. He brought her a blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She pulled it close to her face as if hiding behind it made her safer. Then Daniel went to the kitchen and made her a small bowl of soup. The smell filled the room, and soon the girl's fear gave way to hunger. She began to eat, spoon by spoon. Each bite seemed to bring her back to life. As she ate, Daniel sat across from her, watching carefully. She was fragile, yet there was something strong in her eyes, something that had helped her survive until now. After a few minutes he asked gently, "What's your name?" She looked at him for a long time before whispering, "Lena?" "Lena," Daniel repeated softly. "That's a beautiful name." He smiled, but her face stayed serious. He decided not to push her with more questions. Instead, he said, "It's okay, you don't need to tell me anything else tonight. You're safe here, that's all that matters." For the first time, Lena's lips curved into the smallest smile. It was faint, almost hidden, but Daniel noticed that smile gave him hope. Later, as Lena began to grow sleepy, Daniel set up a pillow and blanket for her on the couch. She lay down but refused to close her eyes fully. She kept glancing at the door, as if she expected someone to storm in at any moment. Daniel sat nearby, keeping watch. He did not want her to feel alone. The night was long. Daniel could not sleep. His mind replayed everything. How could a little girl be left like this? Was she abandoned? Was she running from someone? Or was something worse behind her story? The silence in the room felt heavy with secrets. In the morning, Lena woke to the smell of bread and tea. Daniel had prepared breakfast. She sat up slowly, still cautious. He placed the plate in front of her and said, "Eat, you'll need your strength." She nodded and began to eat quietly. After breakfast, Daniel decided to take action. He could not just keep Lena hidden. He needed to find her family. He asked her again carefully, "Lena, do you remember where you live?" She looked down at her plate and shook her head. Then after a pause, she whispered, "Home is gone." Her words were simple but heavy. Daniel felt a chill. What did she mean? Was her home destroyed? Did something happen to her parents? He could not understand fully, but he could see the pain in her eyes. Daniel took her outside, hoping that walking through the neighborhood might help. They visited shops, asked people if they had seen a missing child, but no one recognized Lena. The more Daniel searched, the more uneasy he felt. It was as if Lena had come from nowhere. Days passed and still no answers. Lena stayed with him and slowly she began to trust. She followed him around the apartment. She spoke a few more words each day. She laughed once, a small laugh. When Daniel dropped a spoon and made a silly face, that laugh was like music. It reminded him that inside this frightened child, there was still hope. One evening, as the sun was setting, Daniel noticed Lena staring out the window. Her face was serious. Her small hands clutched the blanket tightly. He asked softly, "What is it, Lena?" She whispered, "They will come, they always come." Daniel froze. Who was they? What did she mean? His heart raced. Was someone looking for her? Was she in danger? The fear in her voice was real. He knew then that this was not just a case of a lost child. Something much darker was behind her story. That night Daniel made a decision. He would protect her no matter what. He would not let anyone hurt her again. She was more than a stranger now. She was under his care, and he would stand between her and whatever shadows haunted her. As Lena fell asleep that night, Daniel looked at her and felt something change inside him. This was no longer about rescue. It was about responsibility. He did not know what the future would bring, but he knew one thing clearly. He could not turn away. He would fight for this little girl as if she were his own. And somewhere in the silence of the night, while Lena slept peacefully for the first time in days, Daniel felt that his life had already begun to shift in a way he never imagined. The rescue was not just about saving a child, it was about saving himself too. Searching for the mother. Days turned into nights, and nights turned into days. Daniel tried his best to keep Lena safe and comfortable. The little girl was slowly changing. At first she barely spoke, her words short and broken. But now she answered simple questions. Sometimes she even asked him things. Her voice was still soft, but it was no longer empty. Daniel knew, however, that her silence was hiding secrets. She was too young to carry such heavy fear. Yet every time he asked about her mother, Lena turned away. Her small shoulders stiffened, and her lips pressed shut as if locked by an invisible key. Daniel could not give up. He decided to search for her mother himself. He walked through markets, busy streets and neighborhoods, carrying a photo he had taken of Lena with his phone. He showed it to people. "Have you seen this child? Do you know her family?" But every answer was the same. Shakes of the head, eyes filled with pity. The city was large, yet Daniel felt it had suddenly become smaller. How could no one recognize her? It was almost as if Lena and her mother did not belong here, as if they had drifted into this place from another world. One morning, Daniel took Lena to the police station. He thought maybe this was the right step. But when they entered, Lena's hand tightened around his like a trap. Her small fingers dug into his skin. Her body trembled. "No, please," she whispered. "No police." Daniel stopped in his tracks. He looked down at her pale face. The fear in her eyes was not the normal fear of a child. It was deep, powerful, and desperate. He could not force her. He sighed and left the station quietly. The officers glanced at him curiously, but he said nothing. That night Daniel lay awake. He stared at the ceiling and thought, why would a child fear the police so much? What had happened in her past? Who was her mother really? Meanwhile, Lena slowly became part of Daniel's life. She followed him when he cooked, she sat nearby when he read. At night she sometimes had nightmares. She would wake crying, calling softly for Mama. Daniel would sit beside her, calming her until she slept again. Each time his resolve grew stronger. He had to find her mother, not just for her, but for himself too. Weeks passed, and rumors began to spread in the neighborhood. Some people whispered about the strange man with a child who was not his. Others asked questions he could not answer. Daniel felt the pressure building. He knew he needed answers soon. One evening, Daniel decided to take Lena to the park where he had first found her. Maybe she would remember something. They walked together under the fading light of the sun. Lena held his hand tightly, but when they reached the bench, she stopped. Her eyes grew wide. She pointed at the far corner of the park. Daniel followed her gaze. There, scratched faintly on the wooden bench, were letters. They were messy, carved with something sharp, but still readable. It said, "Mama was here." Daniel's breath caught. He looked at Lena, who stared at the words with tears in her eyes. "Mama," she whispered, "she was here?" Daniel knelt beside her. "Do you remember this place with your mother?" Lena nodded slowly. She said, "She would come back." Her small voice cracked. "But she never came." Daniel felt both hope and worry. If her mother had been there, then maybe she was still alive. But why had she left Lena alone? Why had she not returned? Questions piled in his head like heavy stones. The next day, Daniel began asking around the park. He spoke to old men who played chess, women who sold food, even the street cleaners. Most said they had not seen anything unusual, but one old woman said quietly, "Yes, I saw a woman with a little girl here many weeks ago." The woman looked tired, hungry, her clothes were dirty. She kept looking over her shoulder as if someone was chasing her. "Do you know where she went?" Daniel asked quickly. The woman shook her head. "No, she disappeared into the night like a shadow." Daniel thanked her and walked away. His heart was heavy. The picture was becoming clearer. Lena's mother was alive, but she was running from something, or someone. That night Daniel and Lena sat together. She asked him softly, "Will Mama ever come back?" Daniel hesitated. He did not want to lie, but he also did not want to break her hope. He said gently, "I don't know, Lena, but if she is out there, we will find her, I promise." Her small hand reached for his. She whispered, "Promise?" "Promise," Daniel said firmly, and he meant it. Days stretched into more searches. Daniel asked at shelters, hospitals, bus stations. He showed Lena's picture everywhere, but still no answers. The city seemed like a maze, and Lena's mother was a ghost inside it. Yet Daniel did not give up. Something inside him told him this journey was not just about finding Lena's mother, it was about uncovering the truth, and maybe, just maybe, that truth would change everything. As the moon rose high one evening, Lena sat by the window, staring at the stars. She whispered, "Mama will come, she promised me." Her voice was filled with fragile hope. Daniel stood behind her, watching the night sky too, his heart heavy with questions, his mind burning with determination. The search was far from over. It was only the beginning, and Daniel knew deep inside, whatever was waiting at the end of this journey, it would not only change Lena's life, but his own as well. The mother returns. The search stretched on like an endless road. Daniel had asked countless people, visited countless places, but the mother remained missing. Every night, Lena still sat near the window, whispering to the stars, "Mama will come, she promised me." Daniel could only place a comforting hand on her shoulder. His heart ached at her faith, a faith stronger than his own. Then one evening something changed. The air outside felt heavy, as if the night carried a secret. Daniel was making dinner while Lena played with a small doll he had bought her. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, not a light knock, but a hurried, desperate one. Daniel froze, his hand tightened around the spoon he held. Who would come at this hour? Slowly he walked toward the door, his mind filled with caution. He opened it carefully, and what he saw made his breath catch. A woman stood there. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her face pale with exhaustion, her eyes, dark, tired, yet burning with emotion, locked on the small figure behind Daniel. She stumbled forward, her voice trembling. "Lena?" Lena's doll slipped from her hands, her eyes grew wide, and then she screamed with joy, "Mama!" She ran past Daniel, straight into the woman's arms. Tears streamed down both their faces as they held each other tightly. Lena clung to her mother as if she would never let go. Daniel stood frozen, watching the reunion. His heart was overwhelmed. He had dreamed of this moment for Lena, but he had not expected it to be so raw, so powerful. The mother kissed her daughter's hair again and again, whispering, I'm so sorry, I never wanted to leave you, I promised I would come back." For a moment, the world outside seemed to vanish. It was only mother and child, their tears washing away weeks of pain. Finally, the woman looked up at Daniel. Her face was lined with sorrow, but her eyes shone with gratitude. "You saved her, didn't you? You kept her alive when I couldn't, thank you? Daniel shifted uncomfortably. He had never sought thanks. I just did what anyone would do, he said quietly. But the woman shook her head fiercely. No, not anyone. People turned away. I begged for help and doors closed, but you gave her safety, you gave her hope. Her voice broke again. She hugged Lena tighter, as if afraid someone might take her away again. Daniel wanted to ask many questions. Why had she left Lena? Where had she been? Who was she running from? But he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. He decided to wait. She needed time. He led them both inside. Lena refused to let go of her mother's hand. The little girl's face glowed with happiness, brighter than Daniel had ever seen. She laughed through her tears. Mama, I knew you would come back. I told him you promised. The mother smiled weakly, brushing her daughter's hair back. Yes, my little one, I promised and I kept my promise. Later that night, after Lena finally fell asleep in her mother's arms, Daniel sat across the room. The woman looked at him with tired eyes. She spoke softly, as if afraid to wake her child. I don't even know your name. Daniel, he said. Daniel, she repeated. I owe you more than I can ever repay. Her voice trembled. I left Lena because I had no choice. There were people after me, dangerous people. I thought she would be safer alone than with me, but every night I hated myself. Every night I prayed she was alive, and then, here she is, safe because of you. Daniel felt a wave of sympathy. He had seen fear in Lena's eyes, and now he understood. Her mother had been living in the shadows, running from something that threatened them both. But what she said next left him stunned. She looked straight at him, her voice trembling but firm. You are not just her rescuer, Daniel. You are part of her life now, part of mine too, and I have nothing to give, no riches, no home, but I have myself. Will you be my husband? The words hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Daniel's chest tightened. He had never expected this, never imagined it, a marriage proposal from the mother of the child he had rescued. It was too sudden, too overwhelming. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. His heart raced, his mind swirled. He looked at Lena sleeping peacefully, her small hand curled around her mother's dress. He thought of the nights she had cried for her, the way she had clung to him, the way she had begun to trust. Now everything was changing. The woman leaned closer, her eyes full of both fear and hope. I know this is strange, but I feel it. You are the man who was meant to be here, meant to protect us. Fate brought you to Lena, fate brought you to me. Daniel swallowed hard. He felt torn between disbelief and something deeper stirring inside him. Could it be true? Could destiny really work this way? That night ended with silence between them. Daniel could not give an answer, not yet, but as he lay awake he realized something. His life was no longer his own. It was tied to Lena, tied to her mother, tied to a story he never asked for but could no longer walk away from. The mother had returned, yes, but she had brought more than reunion. She had brought questions, mysteries, and a proposal that could change everything. And Daniel knew, the real story had only just begun. An unusual request. The night after her return was heavy with silence. Lena slept peacefully between them, her tiny hand resting on her mother's arm, but for Daniel, sleep did not come easily. His thoughts circled like restless birds. The image of the woman standing at his door, broken yet determined, stayed in his mind, and her words, those impossible words, will you be my husband? When morning came, sunlight streamed through the small window. Lena woke first, her laughter filling the room like music. She clung to her mother, unwilling to let go even for a moment. The bond between them was unshakable. Daniel watched quietly, his heart warmed yet uneasy. Later, when Lena went outside to play in the courtyard, her mother turned to Daniel. Her face was pale, her voice low. I know what I asked you last night must sound strange, maybe even foolish. She paused, her eyes shining with both sorrow and hope. But Daniel, you don't understand what you've done for me. Daniel leaned forward. Then help me understand, tell me why. The woman took a shaky breath. My name is Alara, she began, her voice trembled as she spoke. Before Lena was born, my life was already dangerous. I was connected to people who lived in shadows, people who made threats and demanded loyalty. When I tried to leave them, they punished me, they swore they would hunt me forever. She glanced toward the door as if expecting someone to burst in. When Lena was little, they discovered her, they told me she would be used against me, they would take her away if I didn't obey. That's when I made the hardest choice of my life. I left her hidden, believing she would be safer away from me. It broke me, but I thought it was the only way to keep her alive. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He remembered Lena's words, they always come. Now it made sense. The little girl had lived with fear because her mother's enemies were real. Ilara wiped her eyes. But you found her, you kept her alive when I couldn't, you protected her even when you didn't know who she was. Daniel, I've seen many kinds of men, but none like you. You're the kind who risks everything for a child who isn't even your own. That kind of heart is rare, rarer than gold. Daniel lowered his gaze. He wasn't used to such words. He had always seen himself as an ordinary man, but in Lena's eyes, in Alara's words, he was becoming something else. Alara's voice grew firm. I am asking you to marry me not because of tradition, not because I seek comfort, but because I believe fate has placed you in our lives. If I am alone, Lena will never be safe. They will come again and I may not be able to fight them, but with you, I believe we could stand against anything. Her request carried more than love. It carried survival. She was not just offering her hand. She was offering her trust, her life, her daughter's future. Daniel's mind spun. He thought of Lena's fragile smile, her laughter, the way she had slowly grown to trust him. He thought of the nights she had cried for her mother, and the relief when Alara returned. Now he saw the bigger picture. Lena needed more than a protector for a few weeks. She needed stability. She needed a family. Yet fear gnawed at him. Could he truly step into such a role? Could he marry a woman he barely knew, simply because destiny had pulled their paths together? Alara seemed to sense his hesitation. She placed her hand gently on his. I know this is sudden. I know you don't owe me anything, but Daniel, I beg you, don't walk away. If not for me, then for Lena. She already sees you as someone important. You are in her heart. Daniel looked through the window where Lena was playing with a small ball. Her laughter floated in, pure and innocent. He realized Alara was right. In Lena's short life, safety and trust were rare, and somehow he had become both. Still, Daniel needed to understand. What happens if I say no? He asked quietly. Alara's eyes darkened. Then I will keep running. I will take Lena and vanish again, and one day they will catch us, and when they do. Her voice broke. She could not finish, but the fear in her eyes spoke louder than words. The weight of her request pressed down on Daniel like a mountain. It was not only about love or family, it was about survival, about fate, about standing against dangers he did not yet understand. That night, Daniel sat alone long after Lena and Alara had fallen asleep. He thought about his own life, quiet, ordinary, filled with routine, and now fate had thrown him into a storm. A little girl he had never known had become part of his soul. Her mother had returned with both gratitude and desperation. And now, a single choice stood before him, a choice that could rewrite everything. As the moonlight touched the floor, Daniel whispered to himself, what am I supposed to do? His heart was torn between fear and a strange, growing sense of destiny. The unusual request hung in the air like a question too heavy to answer. But one thing was clear. There was no turning back. Daniel's life was already changed forever, and whether he accepted or refused, nothing would ever be the same again. The decision. The days after Alara's request were heavy with silence. Daniel went about his usual tasks, cooking, cleaning, taking Lena for short walks. But his mind was never still. Every moment he was haunted by her words. Will you be my husband? He had faced many choices in life, but none like this. Marriage was more than a bond between two people. It was a promise, a responsibility, and in this case it was also a shield, a protection against the shadows chasing Alara and her daughter. At night, Daniel lay awake listening to the soft breathing of Lena as she slept. Sometimes she would reach out in her dreams, calling for her mother. Sometimes she would whisper his name too. That sound touched something deep inside him. He was no longer just a stranger to her. He was her safety, her anchor. But still, doubt gnawed at him. Could he really become a husband overnight? Could he accept a life filled with danger, knowing enemies might come knocking at his door? He thought of the quiet life he had once lived, and he thought of how far from that life he now stood. Alara sensed his struggle. She did not push him, but her eyes often lingered on him, filled with questions she did not ask. One evening, after Lena had gone to bed, she sat across from him. Daniel, she said softly, I don't want to trap you. I don't want to force you into something you don't want, but I need you to understand, this is not about me alone. It's about Lena. She needs more than a roof, more than food. She needs stability, a family. She needs a father figure she can hold on to. Daniel looked down at his hands, the weight of her words pressed against his chest. He thought of his own childhood, how he had grown up with no one to guide him after his parents died early. He knew the emptiness of growing without love. He didn't want that for Lena. Still, fear spoke in his mind. What if I fail? What if I cannot protect them? The following day, Daniel decided to clear his head. He took Lena to the park. She ran in circles, laughing, her little feet chasing a butterfly. Daniel watched her with a mixture of joy and pain. She was so innocent, so full of life, and yet the world around her was dangerous. She came running back to him, her cheeks red from play. Will Mama stay this time? She asked suddenly. Daniel froze. The question pierced his heart. He knelt down and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Yes, Lena, she will stay, he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was making a promise or a prayer. That night, as the three of them sat together eating dinner, Lena smiled brighter than ever. She looked from Daniel to her mother and back. We are a family now, right? she asked, her small voice carried such hope that it silenced the room. Elara looked at Daniel, her eyes wet. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He wanted to answer yes, but the words stuck in his throat. When Lena went to bed, Daniel walked outside alone. The streets were quiet, the lamps casting long shadows. He leaned against a wall, staring at the sky. "What should I do?" he muttered. He was torn between fear and destiny. The ordinary man he had been wanted to run, to escape, but the man he was becoming wanted to stay. Suddenly he remembered the first night he found Lena, her small hand clutching his, her eyes filled with fear. That memory struck him hard. He realized he could never forget that moment, never let go of her trust. Elara stepped outside quietly. She stood beside him, not speaking at first. The silence stretched between them. Then she whispered, "I know it's unfair to ask so much of you, Daniel, but you must see it too. Fate has tied us together. If you walk away, Lena will break, and if I try to face the future alone, I may not survive it." Her voice shook, but her words were steady. She turned to him, her eyes filled with fire. "You saved her once, but now I am asking, will you save us both?" Daniel's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. He felt the weight of the world pressing down. He closed his eyes and listened, to the quiet night, to the echo of Lena's laughter, to the plea in Elara's words. Finally he opened his eyes. He turned to Elara, his voice low but firm. "I am afraid of the danger, afraid of failing, but I cannot walk away, not from her, not from you, so yes. If this is what it takes to protect you, if this is what fate has chosen, then I will do it." Elara gasped, her hands trembled as she covered her mouth, tears streamed down her face. "Daniel?" she whispered. "Thank you, you don't know what this means." He shook his head. "No, I do, it means everything will change." She stepped closer, her voice breaking. "Then let it change, let us face it together." For the first time in days, Daniel felt peace, not because the danger was gone, but because he had made a choice. The decision was not easy, but it was clear. He had stepped into their lives as a stranger, but now he would stay as something more. Inside the apartment, Lena stirred in her sleep, a small smile resting on her lips, as if she could feel the future shifting around her. The family she dreamed of was finally forming. Daniel stood in the night, Elara by his side. His fear had not vanished, but his resolve had grown stronger. The decision was made, and from that moment, his life was no longer his own. It belonged to Lena, to Elara, to the fragile bond that had become unbreakable. The road ahead would be dangerous. He knew shadows still lurked. He knew enemies might come, but he also knew one thing for certain. He would face it all, not as one man alone, but as part of a family. The decision had been made, and nothing would ever be the same again. A new beginning. The decision was made. Daniel could feel its weight in his chest, but along with that weight came a strange calm. For weeks he had been torn, unsure of where his life was going. Now for the first time he felt a direction, a purpose. The next morning, Lena woke up brighter than ever. She jumped into Daniel's arms before he even had time to stand. "Good morning, Papa," she shouted without thinking. The word slipped out of her mouth like it had been waiting all along. Daniel froze, his eyes widened, but then he saw her smile, so pure, so innocent. He laughed softly and hugged her. "Good morning, little one," he whispered. Elara watched from the kitchen, her hands trembling as she held a cup. Tears filled her eyes. That one word, Papa, had sealed the bond stronger than any promise. Life slowly began to shift. Daniel's apartment no longer felt like a place for one man. It began to feel like a home. The laughter of Lena filled the rooms. Elara's presence brought warmth to the cold walls. For the first time in years, Daniel no longer ate alone. He no longer walked through silence. But the shadows of the past had not vanished. Elara often grew tense when footsteps echoed outside. Sometimes she stayed awake late into the night, her eyes fixed on the window. Daniel noticed, and though she tried to hide it, he knew the danger was still out there. Yet now he was ready. If they came, they would not face Elara and Lena alone. They would face a family. One evening, Daniel took Lena and Elara to the park, the same place where it had all begun. The bench where he had found Lena still stood quietly under the trees. He sat there with them, watching Lena chase fireflies. Elara sat close beside him. "Do you ever think," she whispered, "that this was fate?" Daniel looked at the child laughing under the stars. He remembered the fear in her eyes that first night. He remembered her trembling hand in his, and then he remembered how she had smiled at him, slowly, piece by piece. "Yes," he said finally, "I think it was." Elara leaned her head on his shoulder. "I used to pray every night that Lena would find someone kind, someone strong enough to protect her if I couldn't, and then she found you." Her voice cracked. "Maybe the universe answered my prayer." Daniel felt his throat tighten. He had never thought of himself as anyone's answer. But now, as he looked at Lena's happiness, he realized that maybe this was the truth. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, the three of them grew closer. Lena began calling Daniel Papa, openly, proudly, without hesitation. The neighbors whispered at first, but soon they too accepted this unusual family. What mattered was the love that tied them together, not the blood that didn't. Still, one night Daniel sat alone with Alara. He looked at her seriously. "You asked me to marry you and I said yes to being part of this family, but Alara, I need to know, was it only for safety? Or is there more?" Alara met his gaze, her eyes glistened. "At first it was safety, I will not lie, but now it is because of you. You are the man who brought hope back into Lena's eyes. You are the man who made me believe in tomorrow again. I don't just need you, Daniel, I want you." Her words hit deeper than any promise. Daniel took her hand gently. "Then we will build this life together, not out of fear but out of love." The wedding was small, simple, just them and a few kind souls who had stood by quietly. There were no flowers of gold, no grand halls. But when Alara placed her hand in Daniel's and Lena stood between them smiling, it was richer than any treasure. For Lena, it was the happiest day of her young life. She laughed and twirled in her small dress, shouting, "Now we are really a family." The crowd laughed warmly, but Daniel's eyes grew misty. He had never thought he would find such joy. Afterward, life did not turn into a fairy tale. There were still struggles, there were still shadows. But now Daniel faced them differently. He no longer lived only for himself. He lived for them, for Lena's laughter, for Alara's smile. One night, as the stars lit the sky, Daniel sat by the window watching Lena sleep peacefully. Alara came and sat beside him. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. Daniel shook his head. "No, not for a moment." He looked at her, his voice firm. "Saving her led me to you, and being with you both saved me too. This isn't just a new life, Alara, this is a new beginning." She leaned her head against his shoulder, silent tears of happiness slipping down her cheeks. For the first time in years she felt safe, not because the danger was gone, but because she was no longer facing it alone. And so their story began, not as strangers but as a family, forged by fate, tested by fear, and bound together by love. The man who had once walked alone through empty streets now walked hand in hand with a little girl and her mother. The child he had rescued had given him more than gratitude. She had given him purpose, she had given him family, she had given him a new beginning.